So hello, Lynne Twist. Welcome to How We Change the World podcast. Who better to show us the way than you? I'd like to, just before we even talk about anything else, open with a quote that's in your book that one of your colleagues wrote about you. It says, "To encounter Lynne Twist is to have your life changed, your perspective shifted, your pessimism shaken, your heart opened." That's your friend Mary Earl Chase. That is so true. You don't know me very well. And I see you from afar, and that has happened to me. So I can only imagine how it is with the people in your life. So I just really think that that's a true statement. And so welcome very much for being here. You are truly one of the most transformational leaders of our time. I hope that you agree with that. So that's why I'm so honored that you're on here. Because really what you do and how you lived your life is the epitome of the message of what this podcast is all about. You know, basically that we all have our role to play. We all have a calling and a purpose, and that we need to act to keep hope alive in these, as everyone calls them now, challenging times. But that is what this podcast is about, and that is completely what you embody. So that's why you're perfect. So we're going to spend this hour or so talking about this book, which just came out, Living a Committed Life, Finding Freedom and Commitment in a Purpose Larger Than Yourself. I'm going to just keep talking for a minute, and then I'm going to let you talk a lot. But I just want to say this book, I don't really even have words for how much this book has impacted me, truly, in a way that is more substantial than maybe any book I've ever read. I listened to the audiobook, which you read it, which was perfect because you have a lot of emotion. You're telling your own life stories, your own lived experience. So you've got emotion, you've got passion, you've got sadness and joy, and it all comes through, and it makes it really, really easy to listen to.
Thank you first, Deborah, for your kindness and your generosity and for loving my book. And that's so fulfilling for an author, and I just, and for anybody. So just,
yeah.
I don't want to let you keep going without my saying thank you and back at you, because, that you consumed it the way you did, the way you were a sponge for it makes a lot of difference. So listening is important as speaking, and reading is important as writing. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I feel that people who will embrace this book the way I did are probably people who want to hear it. You know, sometimes you have to be ready for the message, and it's not a new message to me, but the way it is presented was in a new way. Many people talk about purpose, about taking a stand, although not exactly. You speak about that a little bit differently than other people do, and I want you to speak to that in a minute. But there's a lot of the truths that are in this book, a lot of the concepts I have heard before and people have heard before, but a lot of times people will speak to them with less truth behind it, with less lived experience, so it doesn't come through quite as emotionally or as real, I think. You know, it's a lot of preaching in the world, but when you're actually just saying, yeah, this is what it is, and this is how I lived it, it just has a different resonance to it. I think what will come across to people is that what came across for me most deeply is how well you marry the pragmatic, and you can tell by the people that you've worked with, the pragmatic with the spiritual and mystical sort of. You know, it all is very interwoven. It is throughout the book. It is throughout your life. And so that's kind of who you are. And it's been a journey, right?
It has
to say the least.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. And you haven't really, you don't stop much, do you? Like, are you the type of person, you said you don't have balance in your life. Do you work all the time pretty much, and then play all the, is every minute and every day full to the brim for you?
Well, let's see. It is full. Let's say full is a good description. I'm well used. Let's put it that way. I when you hold yourself as your life starring you, that's a certain kind of life. That's not my life. I mean, maybe it was in the beginning, but I'm really, I've given my life over. So I I feel like I'm an instrument of something. And when you live that way, you feel well used. That's one thing that happens. But also you need to take care of the instrument you've been given to be of service, to allow what wants to happen to come through you. And there's a phrase, drink as you pour, that I put in the book because it's so important for me to do that, to make sure that I drink as I pour. I've got my bone broth.
You're learning. You're trying.
So I get, I have crashes and burns too, just like anybody. But I also know that it's all in service of something larger than myself. That's really the point of the book, that the joy in my life, and I can really testify that it works. So I'm offering it and encouraging and inviting others to live a life purpose that's larger than yourself, larger than your life starring you, so that the noise and doubts and fears and negative thinking and I don't know if I should or do they like it, and all that stuff moves to the background. It doesn't go away completely because we're human. And your commitment moves to the foreground. And if the commitment is truly inspiring to you and you get that it's why you're here,
right?
It's a commitment way larger than your own life. It's a commitment you can never really take credit for, but you get the joy of participating fully in what you're committed to. And that's so fulfilling that it frees you into your full self-expression. And then the commitment does this wonderful thing to you, in my opinion. It comes back into your life, especially if it's a big commitment, like bigger than you thought you could make. And it shapes you into who you need to be to fulfill it while you're fulfilling it. So it's so amazing. People think that that Mahatma Gandhi was born a genius, and then he, developed into this amazing person who we quote all the time and we revere.
Right.
Everybody, he's like a taproot. Or Martin Luther King, same, we think that, or Jane Goodall, or, some of the people walking the earth today. But I say it's that we were all born with talents and treasures, and we're all in that way. I'm talking about, ordinary human beings. And when an ordinary human being makes an extraordinary commitment, that's when they become extraordinary, because the commitment makes you extraordinary. It forces you to be great. Yeah. It forces you to let go of your doubts and fears. You don't have time to worry about what whether you look good or whether your hair is right. I mean, unless it's important for your commitment. So, your commitment wakes you up in the morning. Your commitment tells you what to wear. Your commitment tells you, what meetings to say yes to. So it's so freeing.
When you started, like, say, with the Hunger Project, you didn't know that was going to happen, did you? I mean, because think about someone who's listening right now who says, well, yeah, she says that, but you truly didn't know. You just let yourself be taken over by this mission that you committed to. And then all of a sudden you're off and running. You didn't know what powers you were going to develop. You didn't know that your ego was going to just have to take a back seat and disappear. Right. I mean, you just went with it.
That's true. So it's a little bit like falling in love. Everybody wants to, but you just don't know when it's going to happen or if it's going to happen. And then when it happens, it's like, wow.
Yeah. That's
you're,
great. That's a great analogy.
It's really, I sometimes say I was in the right place at the right time, which sounds like, coincidence, but I would call it more a divine appointment. And I would say, if I hadn't been paying attention, I would have called it a coincidence, or I would have treated it like a coincidence, or, a wonderful set of circumstances. But when you're paying attention, which is, I think, really a key thing, and I can say a little bit more about what I mean by that.
Yeah, I'm curious.
You realize this is like something's calling to me here. This is not normal. This is not, everyday stuff.
What hadn't happened before. It's the first time it had happened to you.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time it happens, like first time you fall in love, you're not really sure what it is.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like I have a formula for people.
Of course.
I just know that paying attention and knowing that you are having the context, I'll call it the context, that your life, you would not be born now if you didn't have a role to play, because we live in this epic period. 2020 to 2050 is just pivotal for the future of life, particularly human life. And we all have a role to play, and we can be, huddled in our house afraid. We can be world warriors.
Mm-hmm.
World warriors. We have to
oh, that's great.
We have to choose that right now.
Yeah.
And I say that everybody has a role to play. It's not a big role or a small role. It's just your role. And if you allow yourself to fully surrender to it and to let it call to you, even ask the universe to bring it to you if you don't know what it is, your life is just filled with meaning and freedom and full self-expression and prosperity, actually, and love. And love. Yeah.
And you obviously had no idea that would be the outcome when you took that first step. But once you took that step, you worked with the Hunger Project. You raised millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. You worked with Buckminster Fuller. You worked with Werner Erhard. I mean, just some Paul. So many people that you've had the chance to. Not Paul Hawken came later, I understand, but. It brought you into company with so many amazing people, because once you stood, you're in the flow and things just start coming. It's just that so many people talk about that happening, that once you fully commit, Providence will move. And it does seem like there are times when it does, and there are times when it doesn't. And I think that there are people who might wonder, well, I've been looking, and first of all, I'm concerned there's so many things you could choose from right now that need help, whether it's democracy, racism, environment, the global warming. We all know there's no end to the things that we could go on about. I'm concerned about all of them. I have this problem a lot in my life. It's like, where do I start? And that can really cause the analysis paralysis, and it really can. But how does one start down the path? Is it reading? How do you hear? There must, for myself, I like to just listen. Like I have 20 minutes in the morning where I do nothing, but there is no noise and I just listen. And I have gotten a lot of answers that way. And sometimes you're not sure, but they seem pretty sure. They seem pretty clear to me. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you've ever done, or is there a way that you think people can find what calls to them? Because that's probably the biggest problem. Once you're committed, the game's over. It's easy. You just keep going. But getting that initial direction and call is, I think, where people struggle the most.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I agree. And I also feel that I want to just say that I've been very fortunate to be able to discern and choose my calling and feel it. Mm-hmm. At the same time, when I say pay attention, what I mean by that is pay attention to the through line of your life. So for people who are kind of struggling with that, I suggest you think about there's a through line that you can where everything sort of connects together. So like when you were little, when you were a little person, and maybe when you were in kindergarten or first grade, or, back there in grade school, what were you like then, and what did you really care about, and what were you drawn to? Because usually it starts to show up pretty early. Some things that you're really concerned about, or things that you worry about, or things that you think are so unfair. I like to use the example of kids on the playground. There might be a bully on the playground, and then there's someone who just can't stand it and goes over there and makes sure that the bully doesn't hurt anybody. That person, that little kid, may be a person who's standing, who through his whole life, there's something about he demands justice, that he's a commitment, a stand for justice, or fairness. It might be fairness. Right. Or if there's a little girl who's just absolutely gobsmacked by the forest, and she loves being outdoors, and she loves to climb trees, and she loves to sit in the roots, and then later on, when she moves into an apartment, she doesn't do it for 20 years, but when she looks back, she realizes, I'm committed to trees. I'm committed to the natural world. I'm committed to that, making sure that everybody has access to that kind of beauty. I should be working in some field that gets people, you kind of look through your life for some clues. Then also another clue is what breaks your heart. What calls to your heart and what breaks your heart. And sometimes it's different, but there's something related there. And then another clue is, who are your heroes and heroines? Who, when you hear their name, for me, it was Mother Teresa. Oh my God, she just like hung the moon. She was one of my heroes and heroines. Or Martin Luther King. So, you think about people, I mean, obviously those two are heroines for everybody, but who are the heroes and heroines? Sometimes it's a sports figure that's gone way beyond sports into the spiritual realm. Sometimes it's a political leader that elevated themselves out of the political realm into something much deeper, profound. So those are all clues. And then you just get into action. I think that's really where you find out. And then
the magic happens.
The magic of action.
Yeah.
You fail, you fall down, you pick yourself up, you try the next thing, you fail, you fall down, you try the next thing. Eventually, it's like there's a sweet spot. This is what I love. I want to work with children who've been abused and help heal them. I can feel that that's my place. I can feel that will be my dharma. Or I want to teach kindergarten. Or I want to be a fireman. And I want to do everything I can to prevent the fires in Northern California. I'm going to learn about that. Or, something that is for the common good. It's not just for you and yours, whoever you consider yours to be. It's not for your internal circle or your privileged class, or even your race, or even your tribe.
Or your country.
It's for the common good. That's what pulls you out of the pettiness of our identity and our concerns about ourselves. And that's what gives us freedom and fulfillment. And there's other things too, I'm sure, but that's what I wrote about.
Wow, that's so helpful. And you're putting it in a way also that I haven't heard before. I'm surprised that when you talk about being 6 years old, because I so clearly remember the first time I cared about something I was 6 years old when I went to Catholic school, and the nuns came in. They were missionary nuns. One was from Africa, someone was from Asia somewhere. And I still remember just thinking, they were talking about starving kids and how their work was, they were also missionaries to spread the word of Jesus, I guess. But they didn't talk that way. They were more talking about the poverty that they were dealing with. And I think one of the clues might be that I was just like, I was hook, line, and sinker with them. So I knew immediately that was something for me. But what's also another clue is that you think everybody feels the same way. You just think everybody hates racism, or you think everybody cares about the environment, and even people close to you. And then you find out, that's not really true. Many people will read about it and talk about it, but do they really care about it? So the things that differentiate you right now from people that are in your world, when you see you care so much more about something than they do. But I love the way that you talked about taking a stand. And I wonder if you talk about that a little bit, because it is different. I've taught workshops, and I studied with Jack Canfield, who helped you launch the book, which was a great launch, by the way. Usually I love that. But in his seminars and in his training, I learned how to tell other people how to find their purpose. That was one of the things that we learned, is taking people through exercises. And I actually wrote down my life purpose at that time. And it's very accurate to how I do live and have lived and will continue to live. So there's a lot of value in it. But then you just kind of took it up a notch with your discussion of taking a stand. And I think that's key. I think that's been missing from a lot of people's search for purpose. Maybe you talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is that there's an important distinction between taking a position and taking a stand. And when we take a position, we enter a domain of positionality. And the domain of positionality, at least it's been my experience, is every position creates its opposition. So if I say right, it actually creates left. If I say here, it creates there. If I say up, it creates down. And positionality is kind of like it generates its oppositionality, and that's a very important part of life, to have a position, to know where you are in the room, even. And at the same time, we can just observe that things like pro-choice kind of create pro-life, and then when pro-life gets more entrenched, pro-choice has to get more entrenched,
right,
to balance that or to argue with it. So positionality is very important, and there's nothing wrong with it, and we can get caught in it where we think it's the truth. Another way of talking about positionality, to make it even clearer, is it's also another metaphor for that, or another synonym, is point of view. So a point of view is from where you see. So I'm, sitting in a particular part of this room looking at the screen, which is also right in front of my window. So I have a point of view, and I see this view. If someone were sitting over to my right, and they were looking at the room I'm in, they would see me from the side. They wouldn't see the outdoors through the window. They would have a different point of view, just to illustrate this.
Sure.
And sometimes we think our point of view is, it is the truth for us. Yes, my point of view, where I'm from, sitting in this room, is my point of view is absolutely 100% accurate for me.
Right, it's true.
The person sitting over there, looking at me from the side, the point of view that person has is 100% accurate for them, where they're looking from. And that also applies to all kinds of things in life, like how you were raised, or what religion you are, or what color your skin is. It develops a point of view, a place from which you look at the world. It is the origin, in many cases, of your worldview,
right,
often unconscious, but worldview. And points of view are not bad or good, but sometimes we think our point of view is the truth for everybody else, when in fact, it's just our point of view. It's a contribution to everybody else, but it's not their point of view necessarily. They're not standing in the same spot in the room you are. So points of view have a lot of power and usefulness, but we've begun to think we are our point of view. We are a Democrat. We are a Republican. We are an anti-racist. We are a fascist. We are a this. We are a that. And that then becomes our truth in a way that we try to convince or make it other people's truth, or argue with other points of view. And that's where we get into a little bit of trouble. So you could see in our U.S. Congress,
quite a bit of trouble, actually.
An example of lots of points of view that are,
yeah.
So there's something called a stand, which is different, and and in order to take a stand, one of the beautiful things about it, I think, is you have to relinquish your point of view. You have to let it go.
Oh, that's interesting.
What you receive is vision. Instead of a point of view, you acquire vision. Now, vision, so it's almost as if we were looking at a bunch of points of view at a stadium, let's say, looking at the ball, and then you could get in a drone and go way up above the ball game, and you could see all the points of view, and they all contribute, and you have vision rather than a point of view. So vision, when you have vision, you can really take a stand, and a stand is always for something. It's never against.
Not against, right.
And we stand for something, and all points of view make it possible for us to understand how to have what we're standing for be fully expressed. And so a stand is distinct from a position. A stand incorporates and values all points of view. They're very important to see all points of view and understand them, to get in everybody's moccasins. A stand always is inspiring and creates a field where points of view start to dissolve a little bit. If you think about Martin Luther King, for example, he took positions. He was obviously against racism. He was but he was living from what he was for, not what he was against. And then he would drop down, if I can make it almost geographic, from the vision spot of taking a stand and seeing all points of view into a place where he would get a legislation passed, or he would make sure that this thing got unraveled. But where he came from in order to do that was the stand he took for all children to have a fair and honest and open and authentic, respectful chance at a healthy and productive, dignified life. All children. And so that is so all-encompassing and so whole. And a stand is that. It frees you from your point of view, from your positionality, and has you stand in a way that you can see other points of view. They're helpful to you. You're not arguing with them. You're informed by them. You may not agree with them. That's okay. Mm-hmm. So a stand has power. Archimedes said, give me a place to stand and I'll move the world. And it's true. Yeah. You can and you do. And all the people we really admire, I say, were stand takers, like Martin Luther King, like Mahatma Gandhi, like Mother Teresa, like Oprah, like Maya Angelou, like Jane Goodall, like Zelensky right now. I would say the president of Ukraine, although he has to be against and for a lot of the time, because he's running a war or defense. But who he is he's standing for peace. He's standing for even the peace for the Russians.
Right.
Feel it when he speaks.
Oh, yeah. You can feel a stand. When someone takes a stand, there's no confusion to those watching. There may be people who can still take opposition to that. They take opposition to Martin Luther King. But you can feel the truth of it. And I think, as you wrote in the book, that when you take a stand, it may be so large, like you wanted to end hunger in your life in the next 20 years, I think was the original goal. And it just could be an ongoing thing that you don't get to see the end of. You may not get credit for it, right? You may not. It's like the man who started Charity Water. Scott Harrison. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah, and you probably heard his phrase. He said, "Don't be afraid of work that never ends." Yes. And that's what a stand, I think, is a baby work that never ends, ending racism, ending poverty, but you have a stand. But then, so thank you for that. That was really, that was even more clear than it is in the book. Because when you use this analogy of the drone kind of going up and seeing everyone's point of view, it's really an emotional, that was sort of an emotional thing for me to hear, because there's a relief in it, because you're not having to take a position, because you can see all the positions.
Yes, right.
Once you rise above it, and you have vision.
They all make sense to you. They all make sense. You can understand.
Oh, that's why that person thinks that way. That's why he became that way. That's why he doesn't like to spend money, or does. Yeah.
Yeah. Even people who are somewhat egregious, you can
sure
feel it. Like Martin Luther King, he actually had compassion for George Wallace, who was just terribly righteously against, African American people having any rights almost at all. And then at the end of his life, he regretted it, and he was inspired and aligned with Martin Luther King. So the stand, Martin Luther King created a field. The stand taking creates a field, a magnetic field. It doesn't mean that, some people.
That's interesting.
With him, but it inspires. You just think about his voice on January 15th when they play his speeches sometimes out there. Yeah. And the timbre of his voice, and it's like you'd sit up in your car if you're driving something.
Oh yeah. It'll move you no matter how many times you hear it. It's like tremendous. Well, and then from the stand, as you talk about in the book more, is that from a stand, then you can make this commitment. I mean, that's what the book is titled, Living a Committed Life. Right. And what does that come from? You can't just sit down and say, well, I think I'll be committed to clean sidewalks. You have to, it comes from it's so much easier anyway. It doesn't have to, I don't think, come from taking a stand. But once you took a stand for saving the rainforest, for example, to switch to that part of your life, then you could commit to starting the Pachamama Alliance. Then you could commit to everything that was going to entail, like following someone through a rainforest when you're scared, through a jungle, I should say. you'll do anything because then you have made a commitment.
Yeah.
So is it accurate to say that you take a stand for something first, and from that emerges your commitment to something bigger than yourself, and you make a commitment?
Yeah, I think I would say I don't want to be,
and not that it's that linear,
it's not
linear, right?
Point A, 1A,
right? Because you can get to your purpose without taking a stand.
Yeah,
without consciously taking a stand.
It's very organic and very almost like ineffable.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about now, but
it is
that what you're saying is true. Once you feel that, and it's almost physical, you can feel it in your body. It's like your heart and soul and your body is involved. I was just in an amazing interview with Jill Bolte Taylor, the wonderful neurologist, neuroscientist who had a stroke. And
oh yes, I know.
To witness one part of her brain, so
unbelievable. Yeah,
and I just had a wonderful conversation with her and with a group of women, and some of the things that she said were so powerful, and you could feel everybody's body almost quiver.
Really?
Because if she's standing for the well-being of our brains and our life force, and that we will arise from the way we are as a human family right now into a whole nother evolutionary space. And that's in many cases probably why a higher power, if you might want to call it God or the universe, chose her to have a stroke that she could witness. So she would have to relearn how to read, write, even know what her name, know this is my mother, this is my glasses. My glasses are not me. This is me. Me stops here, and this is not me. Those things that she lost the capacity to have her own identity. She didn't know she was a human. She didn't know what she was. She could feel that she was one with the whole universe and alive, but she wasn't distinguished anymore as a human being. She couldn't understand. She looked at her hand and she didn't know what it was, like that. So her story is so awesome. But what I'm trying to point out is that when she was telling us the insight she received from having a stroke and the deep gratitude she has that she had a stroke and lost every possible function and had to relearn how to walk, to talk, to understand, to use language, etc., like an infant at age 37. Her gratitude for that made me cry because there was something about that she's standing for that event, which for many people would be considered totally tragic, was a transformational, game-changing event in her life, and that she felt almost like destined, chosen, like tapped, called to be someone who would actually transform the way we hold and see the power and opportunity of the human brain. So, I'm just saying it's even physical. And I was crying. I mean, my heart was, just.
I would not be surprised that you were crying, Lynne.
That's one of my top skills.
You are a crier, and it's interesting because I've seen you speak a few times. You've given TED Talks, and you're in some videos, and you're on YouTube, and you are often brought to tears just talking about your work. And I understood it tangentially, sort of. I can get very emotional as well, but when I read the book, I understood it much more because I understood that there's no space between you and what you're working on. There's no space between you and the person who's starving in front of you, or you become your mission, you become your and then when you get to that point, how do you not cry? Because you're dealing with really sometimes very difficult, heart-wrenching things, which actually brings me to another point, which I appreciated so much that you had in the book. And that was the topic about proximity to suffering. I think this is a huge block for many, many people to doing work that is transformational, that is needed in this planet. It's maybe a little bit easier to work with the environment, something very scientific, or to give money, but often to work with people or even animals or anyone who is suffering in any way, to be able to get close to that suffering and not fear it and not keep a distance. It really takes some power to do that. And I was just, and I could see different times when that's been the case for me. And it can be the case in one situation and not another. When you talk about the time when you worked with Mother Teresa and this man came in who was literally dying, he was skin and bones, and you knew he was dying, and you found the, grace and strength to sing to him. Here I go, through his death. That was just like, that's being proximate to suffering, and it's in the fullest measure of it. Mm-hmm. And did that change you when you were, and you've done it? That's just one example of so many you've been through with Ethiopia, Liberia, many places you've been. Did that change you? Did that break you open?
Well, yes, it absolutely did. And it does every time, because I think that pain and joy are one continuum. And the more we allow ourselves to be proximate to or fully experience suffering and pain in our own lives or in the lives of another human being or another life,
of any kind,
it deepens our heart. It deepens our heart, and ultimately it expands our capacity to love and our capacity for joy, actually. So, one of the joys and thrills of life is we want to be happy all the time. Yeah, maybe. But what the ups and downs and the getting over something or getting through something, or I just watched this film, for some reason I want to tell you this, called Exposure, that a friend of mine was the executive producer of, and I met the filmmaker. And it's about a group of women, I think there were 12 of them, Arab women and European women, who didn't even know each other until this woman put them together. They weren't super athletes or anything. They trained for 2 years, and they did an expedition to the North Pole.
Oh, really?
It took everything they had to keep going when it was 34 below, 40 below.
Oh, my goodness.
They had to, big packs on their back. They were pulling a sled with their own tent. They were going, through the ice, and they were on skis. They were on skis. And the filmmaker, I couldn't even believe she caught all this. These are just kind of normal women, moms and secretaries, who are marketing brand managers. I mean, they were just regular folk.
Yeah.
Somehow 1,000 people applied for this expedition, and the criterion was you're not a super athlete. It's not you're supposed to be in bad shape, but
yeah.
It's going to be 2 years of getting preparation.
Oh my goodness!
Applied, and it's this woman who organized it, chose 10 or 12 people. Anyway, it's a book, it's a movie. I know you want to talk about my
No, I'm all in on it. I want to hear. Looking it up.
What I saw there was this thing that's so inspiring to me. The commitment to do that made them into women
who could do it. It's exactly the same story.
But they were becoming the people who could do it while they were doing it. And then when they did it, when they got to the North Pole, I mean, first of all, you didn't know they were going to make it, because there were all these in the film, you're just like, you
don't know.
All these disasters happen, and frostbite, and windstorms and whiteouts and all this stuff. Yeah. And then they make it, and they're there just in a puddle of tears and relief and joy, and the joy of these people when they got there, and the joy of us in the theater. I mean, we were just bursting. So I'm saying that there's something about being afraid to get too close to suffering that minimizes our capacity to feel on the happy side, on the joyful side too. Maybe. I can't prove any of this, but I think
I mean, I can speak to that directly in a really short moment of this happening to me once. And so otherwise, I think, it is true that until you experience something, you're proximate to experiencing it. You don't, you hear it, but until you actually experience it, it is hard to believe sometimes. But I had a similar experience where there was a family who we kind of adopted at this one point. It was a single mom with her 2 kids, and she had scleroderma. She was from Puerto Rico, very poor, and my kids were little, and we kind of just took their kids in, and we were all together almost as a family lots of times. Well, then it comes that this woman actually did become so ill that she was dying. Ooh. And I was in the hospital with her, and she was having nightmares. She kept telling me the nurses were burning her at night. She was hallucinating, and because she was in a really lovely place with lovely doctors who were giving everything to her. And she was very close to death, and I was in the room, and I was doing this to her head because she was really so alone. Her kids weren't there. Of course, they were very little. Her family was back in Puerto Rico. She knew no one. And so I was like doing this, and they all came running over and said, don't touch her. And they pulled me aside, and they're like, it's very dangerous to touch her. And I didn't even know why. I didn't want to know why. But they said, you have to go wash your hands and put on gloves. And so I went and washed my hands, and I came back, and I'm like, screw it. I can't not touch this woman. She's dying. And so I know how you felt with that man. Maybe that's why my emotion about it. But anyway, she didn't die right then, but I left, and I washed my hands really well. And I went out to my car, and I will never forget this because it was like I'm rushing to get home to the kids, kind of what you're talking about with you've got different commitments. And I'm in the parking lot, and it was like I'm looking up, something overcame me. And it was this joy that if I talk too much about, I will really start crying. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, what am I am literally looking around trying to figure out what is causing this. It was a physical, maybe we could give it a scientific explanation to somebody who knew, like your fear and your release. I don't know what, but all I know is that I will never forget that moment. And it was quite a long time ago. So my kids are in their 30s, and they were very little kids. So I'll never forget that. And I can't explain it to anyone. I can try, but it's like a mini version of what you're talking about through a whole life, that you live your whole life just all the way out, all the way letting go, all the way not protecting. And then your whole life becomes that way. You go down, but then you go way up. But then maybe you go way down and you go way up. But meanwhile, you know that you are living your life completely, right? You're living your purpose completely. You're living your, whatever stand you've taken. And just to tie up that one little conversation about a stand and a purpose, the end of it was, there's another, the commitment, and the purpose comes from the commitment. And I think that's the order that I kind of liked, even though I know it's not, a serial operation. You take a stand, you, from your stand can come a commitment to fight for the rainforest, to fight to end poverty, to end hunger. And then from that, you know what your purpose is every day. Okay, my purpose today is to get up and take these steps and to me, that's such a more organic and more truthful and more like actionable purpose, because you've come to it from a very deep and real place. And instead of, like I said, I would start with these purpose exercises, but that's really starting with the end rather than starting from the beginning. So I don't know if that makes sense.
It's all organic. It's not, there's no beginning, middle, end, really. I don't think. Yeah. It's more like, it's not that linear. It's more like it's more like an expression, it's kind of, and it happens outside of time. It's not first we do this and then we do that. And then
right.
And I people are always asking for me to give them some sort of a
roadmap.
And what do I do? And ideas I have, I have little
hints, clues.
Clues. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Pay attention, notice who your heroes and heroines are, like I said earlier. Through line in your life, like, maybe you were a kindergarten teacher and then you were a waitress. So what does that have to do with anything? Well, you create environments that have people feel good about themselves, or something.
You find the connection points. Yeah.
And that's those are the clues, the breadcrumbs,
Yeah. But nobody shows you exactly who to marry and how to, we stumble into things and we find our way, or we don't find our way. We get lost a lot along the way, but
we do. And that's part of the path too. That's actually the path.
Yeah, it is actually. One last thing that I really wanted to make sure we got to was this idea of generating possibility that you spoke of. I think that's one of the things that maybe is lacking as people look forward to how they can. People are right now frozen. Many people that I know are frozen. Many people in their 30s and 40s and 20s who don't want to have children. They're afraid to have children. I understand why they're afraid to have children. We're just at a time of where many people are living in a lot of fear and angst. A little better now that we're pulling out of the pandemic, but it's still, the existential threats are still there. And I think to talk about this idea of generating possibility, it's so interesting because we think about global warming and are we going to find enough non-fossil fuel ways to get our heat? And then all of a sudden, along from nowhere comes this idea that, maybe we're going to have that fission might work. You never know what's going to happen. So the idea of making possibility out of where there is no possibility is like, I think you said, one of your super strengths. You have this ability to find something where nothing exists, right? Yeah. And so how can we, I know Paul Hawken has done this with regeneration, talking about how do we, because he could be he's an environmentalist talking about global warming and the lack of biodiversity and extinction of animals. But yet, even in all that, he knows it so well. He knows the repercussions so well, but he has always found possibility, even in, I think, his darkest days when he was talking about, what we're facing. He could still always see the possibility that we are going to find our way through this, regardless of what it is.
Yes.
I mean, and how do we look for possibility? How do you create possibility? I mean, I know that, again, that's like, there's no way to verbalize it probably, but if you were to.
Well, it comes from commitment. I know Paul very well, and he's committed to creating possibility. Frankie Moore LePay, the great author, she calls herself a possibilist. And as a scientist and as a person who works in the food system department of life, she knows that in order to move us forward, possibility needs to be out in front of us. And there's a phrase in the book you'll see from Michael Beckwith, who says, pain pushes until vision pulls. And that's very consistent with that possibility is, people don't know how to move forward without possibility. And so I know that I'm one of the people, and I don't know, maybe I was born with it, but I've developed it almost like a muscle. Like, when you're a tennis player and you practice your backhand until it really gets good.
Yeah.
It gets stronger and stronger and stronger. You do that with great gratitude. You can do that with possibility. I can create possibility out of a rock, and I'm not kidding. And I know because I'm committed to that. I'm committed to generating futures that empower people. And you generate possibility. You can discover it, yes, but you also generate it. This pandemic, as terrible and tragic and hurtful as it's been, the way I'm holding it is that it's mourning sickness for a species that's being reborn, that's pregnant with a new kind of human being. And that's just a few words. It's a metaphor, but for me, it's a context of possibility that helps pull us through the dark days and the difficult times that are coming. Just like a pregnant woman is uncomfortable and her clothes don't fit and her breasts start to hurt and she's throwing up and all that stuff. But when she finds out she's pregnant, she's thrilled. And then it's all about having a baby, and the possibility is there. And then she can get through almost anything. So possibility is essential to a committed life.
Well, you see the world. It's probably a good place to wrap up our conversation with positivity and possibility. And you really see the world right now as being in the early stages of a major transformation, don't you?
I do, yeah. And we're very much in the breakdown part, but every breakdown has in it the seeds of a breakthrough bigger than the breakdown, I believe. And this breakdown is really feedback from the mother. Global warming, climate crisis is massive, massive feedback to a species that's lost its way, ours. You could say the pandemic is feedback from the mother, a disruption to help our species find a new path forward. Mm-hmm. So we're all in this together, and possibility is essential for us to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So that's one of my jobs in life, and I'm going to do it all the way.
All the way. Well, you are doing it. People can always find you at Soul of Money and also Pachamama Alliance directly if they want to reach out, right?
Yes, they can.
All right. Well, I know that you are a back-to-back, minute-to-minute person, so I won't keep you 1 minute longer, but I appreciate you so much. I cannot thank you enough for spending this hour and enlightening and inspiring all of us. And keep going. Live to be 200 for all of us.
Thank you, Deborah. It was a joy and delight and a total pleasure talking to you.
And total pleasure for me, too. All right. You take care. Bye-bye. Carry on. Okay. Bye-bye.